Hi, and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Mueller. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, John is back after a month-long hiatus. He's been, behind the desk doing all kinds of research and other work that all relates to unmasking the trans movement. And we also have with him a special guest, Gabrielle Clark, back for part 2 today. She's a free speech advocate as well as a parent who has had, the ideology step through her door in multiple ways, and we're going to bring them onto the show right now and kind of let them continue to tell their story. If you missed part 1, we do recommend you go back and take a look at part 1 as you head into part 2 here and now. John, great to have you back again. Gabrielle, thanks for being here for part 2. John, where do we leave off?
Brad, we were getting into Gabrielle's work. Gabrielle does a number of things, including she's been on Fox Business. So in between her consulting work, she has been all over media, including Tucker Carlson when he was still on Fox. And so, Gabrielle, we're so appreciative of having you here. Let's start by having you talk about your website. You are a consultant to parents who have found themselves with kids that have become showing evidence or signs that they're getting sucked into really what we all call the trans cult. So describe your consulting service. Again, I'm going to bring up your site as you do.
Well, thank you so much for having me. My coaching service is basically a peer-to-peer advice sessions for advice for parents on how to address the issues of social transitioning happening to their school-age children in between the ages of in middle school and high school. So any age in that area. We talk together and talk about the different situations that are going on with their children and try to help them become accepting of the body that they have, and try to help them understand what it is that's happening to them naturally. So we try to discuss the ideas behind puberty, the ideas behind, I'm sorry, my cat.
Oh, that's okay. I know we were talking. Don't even worry. It makes you just extremely normal like the rest of us. I have 2 cats myself, so it's cute. It's cute.
But we try. I mean, she's my assistant. So in my
she is your assistant. That's right.
In my consultations, my assistant is there to help. But what we do is we try to affirm reality. I mean, animals, getting outside, getting back into nature, really making the children understand that life is not something that happens on their social media, and that the person in the little box talking to you is not their friend, that they understand that their parents are their safest space, and that they have their absolute best interest at heart. So that's what I do at Affirming Reality, because I know what it's like. I know what it's like to wonder what in the world is going on with your kid when you're doing everything you can to try to understand what's happening.
I want to, at the outset of this episode, as we do most episodes, we're going to do a disclaimer. We are heard in a number of countries. Brad is a Canadian. We have people from Australia, people from New Zealand. Lest anybody attempt to make the case that we are anti anything, we're not. We are pro the protection of raising children. Protection of women and children. We're about raising the bar on the protection of women and children. My background clinically not only has dealt with survivors, severely emotionally disturbed teens, but also sexual predators. And a big concern of mine is that because this entire movement dumbs down intuition, and the reason that is the case is that's how you groom someone into disconnecting themselves from their body and their boundaries. that it makes them ripe for predation, financial predators, sexual predators. And so if you do not help facilitate a child's ability to think, then they cannot give informed consent. So if you fast track them, if you get them on a moving sidewalk that leads toward medicalization, which is the sterilization and amputation of body parts, unless they have been able to think that through, and no child can give consent, then you've unduly influenced them. And so what we are all about is ensuring that people have adequate and accurate information. And that's what you're all about, Gabrielle, right? To affirm reality, to tell someone they're born in the wrong body. Well, how delusional is that? You do not help anybody by telling them that the way to increase their mental health and decrease their symptoms is to detach themselves from their bodies, when in reality, as you pointed out in the last episode, the majority of these kids are just going through the normal angst of puberty.
Yes. One of the most devastating things that you can do to someone is make them go against their own instincts and make them believe that they can't trust themselves, that they can't trust the people around them, that they can't trust their own bodies. The family that you grow up in, by and large, is going to be your foundation for life. So this ideology teaches children that they can't trust their own bodies. They can't trust the parents that love them. They can't.
And that's why we call it a cult, right?
Yes.
Because so continue and reference, as you have referenced, and I have, the trans cult. People need to see the parallels.
Yes, and when I was researching how to pull my child out of this cult, when I was researching it, one of the things that I did to recognize, to understand how I should go about this, I looked into cults of the past. Megan Phelps was one of the Woodsboro Baptist Church survivors, and I really looked into what her story was. There were other cults that I also looked into. Some of the situation in Utah where the people had to flee from those situations. I looked into all of that, and there were so many parallels. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that the religion that they practice is wrong. It means that the implementation of that religion is predatory for that particular group. So when you talk about something like gender ideology or LGBTQIA++, whatever it is, that in and of itself is really innocuous. They're people, they're there to live their lives. But when it becomes a cult is when they try to teach other people that they're somehow not supposed to listen to their own bodies. They're somehow not supposed to listen to the people around them. That's dangerous. It allows for the breakdown of boundaries and the breakdown of safeguarding measures. So they're telling our children the direct opposite of what we learned. We learned to trust your parents. And if a stranger says, don't tell your mom, then that person is a predator. Now, the strangers are telling our children, you can't trust your parents. And everything I'm telling you, don't tell your mom.
And the schools. That's exactly now what the schools are saying.
Yes. Our state-sanctioned strangers. Because, our teachers used to be authority figures that we taught our children to respect, and they are a safe person to go to, because we thought that if they were vetted and they were going into the occupation as a teacher that they had children's best interests at heart. But as you well know, we have activist teachers that are not, their primary goal is not to see to the well-being of children. Their primary goal is to upset the balance of Western civilization, and that means destabilizing the family. And what better way to destabilize the family than to disembody the children? So when you see a teacher that is doing things like calling their students their kids, or saying things like, if your parents aren't going to affirm you, we're your family now. That is very dangerous. That is the breakdown of safeguarding. And we can't continue to allow activists from this cult to dictate to our children who they should and shouldn't trust. We are our children's primary caregivers. We have our children's best interests at heart. And me, I have a gay son. There was never a problem with that. If that's the way he wants to live his life, I love him. I love him no matter what. But you're not going to tell any one of my kids that they are born in the wrong body simply because they were going through a tumultuous puberty. That's unacceptable. And you're certainly not going to tell my kids that they can't trust me to have their best interests at heart. I'm their mother.
And on the previous episode, you had begun to tell the story or describe how you saw your seventh grade child, or in Canada they call it grade 7, starting to suddenly change, and not for the better. And you began to realize that she's being unduly influenced, or at that time she was, and you concluded that somebody was filling her head with stuff. Speak to that. Let's pick that story up again.
Right. So through the SEL program, that program, the social and emotional learning program, in its inception was supposed to be something good, right? So all of the children who had behavioral problems that were minor, but they were still getting into trouble at school, that was supposed to help so that they could learn how to better communicate and so that they could function better at school. I had always had my suspicions about that program because, in my view, all it really wanted to do was turn children into robots. If a child became emotional, then there was somehow something wrong with that child. So I immediately had my suspicions about that program. But what happened subsequently is that there was a metamorphosis of that program that included things like learning how to be compassionate, learning how to be empathetic. And when they talked about empathy, it was really more like teaching the children how to go against their better judgment and accept any kind of behavior as normal, and any kind of behavior as something that they should accept and embrace. Well, if a child is behaving poorly at school, then yes, their peers should take into consideration if that child is having a bad day, but they shouldn't excuse the behavior as normal. And that started to morph into even more bad behavior among the children. But they went even further and tried to start talking about sexualization and accepting people of different sexual orientations and gender. So it became transformative SEL. And there's all kinds of programs like Castle and Glisten. All of those programs are all about sexual positivity in school. What in the world does a child need to learn that from a teacher or a counselor at school? Our schools should be about reading and writing and math, not about pleasure-based sex education. I mean, that is insanity. But this was what was being taught to the children in school at this time. And when the parents realized that this was what was happening, that was when a lot of parents across America decided to really take action and to really stand up and notice, including myself. And when I started paying attention to what was going on with my daughter, that really sparked my activism even further into indoctrination.
Okay, so you saw your daughter go from a relatively well-adjusted, positive, optimistic child who would give hugs, they're very open, to you saw her closing off.
Yes. When before all of this, she was a completely normal, loving child. But during this process of not, identifying as bisexual, identifying as non-binary, and then identifying as trans, the disassociation from her family, the cruelty and negativity that was launched at the people around her, including myself and her siblings, that was uncharacteristic of my daughter. It was not who she was. That was not the kind of person that she had always been. And I knew that was not her.
Sex shouldn't drive your personality, should it? Sex should not drive your personality.
That's right.
That's what's going on in these schools. They're confusing these kids, and their personalities are being all messed up. And one day they want to stand with that person because they like them, which they don't fit in, so now I have to conform to fit in. But then later on today, I'm friends with that guy over there or that girl over there, and I'd love to go stand with them too. So now I gotta change real quick and go be that person. And that confusion is driving kids to the brink. I mean,
yes.
we're seeing parents right now on the street talking about drag queen story time and hours, and we're seeing that conflict starting to happen in LA. We saw it in Ottawa recently up here in Canada. How long till these kids start to battle in the schools next? Isn't that a great question?
Well, yes, and even just individually taking away their agency of who they want to be and who they aspire to be. So they paint the world as this nihilistic place, and give these children this nihilism in their heads and in their souls. So it's like they don't feel like there's anything worth living for anymore.
Which creates anxiety. It creates anxiety within a child.
Yes. And I teach parents how to neutralize that anxiety by affirming what is real, like literally going out and touching grass and seeing the beauty in the world. All of the negativity. I mean, in something as small as self-deprecating remarks, those kinds of things, or the rampant sarcasm and just nastiness that you see from your influencers on TV, and we think it's funny and we think it's cute. It's not so cute when it comes from your 12-year-old. It feels really sick and sad when your 12-year-old is talking about how stupid they are, or how weak they've become, or whatever it is, or how ugly they are. Those are the kinds of things that happen in this cult. It seeks to debase your children, or have them debase themselves, so that they can all be malleable to grooming. And this safeguarding erosion, and this erosion of boundaries, we see it physical erosion of boundaries in the in sports, where there are men competing in women's sports. We see it online, where there's some sort of sympathy or normalization of ideas that we always knew were not okay, such as minor attracted persons and things like that. These kinds of things are being taught to our children, to just break them down and to make them accept any kind of behavior, even if it's damaging to them, and that they should adjust to the damage. That is it's evil, it's cruel. And I tried to help parents get ahead of it and beat it back.
Gabrielle, what do you say to a parent who's thinking of pulling their kids out of school?
Do it.
You didn't do it, did you?
Yes, I did do it.
You did do it.
Yes, I absolutely did do it. I did. One of the very first things, and then that's not for everyone. It just depends on the family. But honestly, there is no safe school that you're going to be able to enroll your kid in and know for sure that they're not going to be indoctrinated with this ideology. I encourage homeschooling programs. I encourage pods and micro school environments. But if your child is to the point where, there is a self-harm situation and all of that stuff, you cannot put out a fire if your child is in the building. You really have to pull them out of the fire before you can fight it. So I do tell parents, just like I did, we had to flee Las Vegas. We left Las Vegas, and I did put her in a school in Houston. But when it was time for her to move on to the next school, I did not find a school that I thought appropriate, so I did homeschool her. So it just depends on the program and the situation. There have been parents who just wholeheartedly would not send their children back into that educational environment. There are some parents in California, some parents in Washington that just refuse to send their kids back into that environment, because no matter what they did at home, it would be completely erased as soon as they went to school. So I encourage people to homeschool if this is something that is an option. But if it's not, charter schools, micro schools, pods, there are some private schools that you will be able to look into to help you get through this. But there is no one size fits all for this situation. We do what we can for every instance.
There you go. Gabrielle, so a parent, they start to see these behavioral changes. They see the changes in attitudes. They see the changes in moods. As you said, one of the most severe situations, and I concur, I've worked with kids, self-injurious behavior. So you're seeing the self-harm. They have to assume stuff's going on at school and online. As you said, one of the things that you're going to recommend to parents is that they unplug, so to speak, that you can help negotiate that, help them with those challenges. So you consult with parents. So if this has been resonating with a parent, they realize, I think I'm losing my kid. Tell them the next step. They can contact you. Again, remind them of your site and how they go about contacting you, and just kind of give them a sense of, after the initial consult, if they feel good about that, what can they expect in working with you, because they don't have to reinvent the wheel. Fortunately, you blazed that trail. So talk to them again. How can they reach out to you?
You can find me at affirmingreality.com and set up an initial consultation. We'll meet for 15 minutes, just something small to kind of get an understanding of what's going on and assess what the next steps should be. And after that, if it looks like something that you're interested in, then we can negotiate the schedule, and we try to do something. I try to accommodate all of the parents. I do work in the evenings so that parents who work and have jobs can get a hold of me. And it's a very informal environment. My assistant, furry kitty cat, is usually in attendance. So it's not a clinical setting. It is very, very calming and soothing. And we just discuss different tactics and different strategies to reach your child and create a positive environment for them to successfully desist. You can also find me on Twitter, which I wouldn't advise, but you can find me on Twitter at GabsClark5. My DMs are always open for any parent that is a little hesitant and they just want some reassurance that this is the steps that they need to take. You can always reach out to me on Twitter in my DMs.
Well, Gabrielle, I'm so excited that you were willing to be on, because good resources are hard to come by. Parents need to understand they have to take this seriously. Good therapists, you can actually help direct them to some therapists that really do have the best interest of their child in mind, rather than just mindlessly sending them off toward medicalization, where they're going to be further indoctrinated or really have their mind set that there's something wrong with them and they have to eradicate their body. Parents need to understand, and you put it beautifully, it's bringing a child out of a cult, and a cult simply is a closed system that has unduly influenced a child, mentally and emotionally manipulated them. So you have to work with people that understand how to bring those kids out, how to change their minds back around. They've been brainwashed in essence. So it's a wonderful thing to have you on our program, that you are a resource out there. I would simply ask parents, be mindful if you do sign up for a consult. I know it's easy for parents to kind of go over that 15-minute mark. I would ask on your behalf. You didn't ask me to do this, but I do consults, right? Parents, remember, keep it, be disciplined enough. Keep it to 15 minutes, because Gabrielle is very, very busy. Gabrielle, thank you so much for being our guest. You're a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. Thank you to both John and Gabrielle for being here today. You can find us on BitChute. You can find us on Rumble. You can find us on YouTube as well. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. I'm Brad Wilder. Till next time, remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. I'll see you soon.